If John Wick and Robert from The Equalizer were locked in a room with one another, who's getting out alive? Who do you think is getting out alive?
I think John Wick is getting out alive. I think
You
John Wick
think
has had
so,
to
eh?
because John Wick has had to kill assassins, whereas a lot of what the Equalizer has done is just kill really defenseless people most of the time. like a lot of these dudes were like just hired guns, or some of them were like, this is our first day on the job. And then John Wick's like, this is the top assassin on the leaderboard. I'm gonna kill this guy.
I'm going for him. Hello and welcome to the movie podcast review of The Equalizer 3. My name is Daniel. I am one of your hosts today, and joining alongside me are my fellow CIA assassins. It's Anthony.
Hello.
And it's Shahbaz.
Hey, how you guys doing out there?
Oh, you're such a friendly assassin, Shahbaz.
But
I
I'm also
that.
like there's a little bit of like a suspicious tone to my hello. It's like, oh, I don't like that
Now,
that he said that.
Now
way.
you're making me feel suspicious of your tone.
You know what?
Always,
I could be
whenever you
undercover.
talk.
Undercover.
That's true. You decided, let me get into the podcasting world.
Yeah.
Because no one will ever assume anything
No.
of podcasters.
No, they're not even paying attention to us.
I think that's how it goes. Anthony, I would love for you to start us off. How are you doing today?
I am, this morning was quite hectic. My mic stopped working and I was scared that I wouldn't be able to record today. But here we are. I fixed it. We got it done. I did some MacGyvering and some equalizing at Best Buy.
Oh, you did some equalizing.
People are dead at Best Buy now, eh?
Man.
They didn't want to help me. So, you got to equalize. That's
I have another use of this XLR cable, if no one else is going to help me. And it's just to, I guess to tie people, like hog tie people, like in Red Dead.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, I came in on a horse swinging an XLR cable to get it fixed.
Shahbaz, how are you doing today, though?
Oh man, so good. Went to go watch Gran Turismo or Turismo, depending on where you're located. And it's a great film. We have a review up for it. We have some interviews coming out for it, or already out for it. I'm not sure when this is coming out. So yeah, definitely go check all that stuff out because it's such a fun movie. It's a fun movie.
It is such a fun movie, and it's another Sony movie. And I want to say thank you to our friends at Sony Pictures Canada for not only inviting us, obviously, to watch Gran Turismo, Gran Turismo, for doing a really cool interview that will be coming out later this week on the movie podcast feed. But we also have some interviews happening for this very movie, which is The Equalizer, which is releasing on September 1st. Again, thank you to our friends at Sony Pictures Canada for inviting us to watch the film. We have lots of thoughts. We have all of that coming very soon, but this is the movie podcast. You can catch brand new episodes all throughout the week with new interviews and reviews on all the latest movies and series. If you're a fan of the movie podcast and you follow us on socials like you should, at the movie podcast on all social media platforms, we did something really, really cool this weekend. And that was a live show with one of our favorites, Jay McCall, who is a legend in, just the world of TV and movies and just in Canadiana. And when you look at Nirvana, the band, the show, and how that is just, I think taking over the world, and especially here in Canada and the States, of just like these two guys who just started off making web videos and now here they are making, incredible movies together and shows together. We had such a great time with him on our live show at FanExpo. So if you were one of the lucky audience members who was there, thank you for coming out. We had such an incredible time doing a live show, and anyone who saw us on the floor at FanExpo and got movie podcast pins, or we were giving out movies, it's one of those things that when you're out in the wild and you get to see, the listeners who are, loyal listeners of the show and just fans of what we do and what Jay does, it's such an amazing experience. And I think, speaking for all three of us, but please guys, I'd love for you to jump in. How did FanExpo feel for you guys this weekend?
I mean, we've been going every year, and at Comic-Con, which was earlier in March this year, we had a chance to have another live show with Eric Bauza and the team over at Sonar. And going into this one, we kind of knew that, okay, FanExpo is really like the big daddy of all these things. Like, it's like where everyone shows up, all the celebs are there. We're also now really outside of COVID, so everything should feel 100% normal. And it was interesting, man. It was such a fun experience. We got to do it Friday during the day, and Yeah, what an absolute blast that was. I had so much fun. Like Jay is such a great person. I felt like when you're doing a panel, like you're almost kind of like, oh, I know what the answers are going to be, but I was so much a part of the audience while talking to him because he had so many great things to say.
Yeah.
That I was just
like, wow,
kind of
this
blown
is a
away.
great episode. I'm going to sit here and listen to this.
I'm going to have to subscribe to these guys after. But no, it was such a blast, and it was nice and busy at FanExpo, which can get really overwhelming. But it was a great time.
It was. Anthony, how about for yourself?
It felt like one of those, NBA after the game type of feelings where,
the press
conference, because it just like you had these spotlights on you and you're like under the pressure, and I'm nervous as hell going into this just a simple conversation, but it's just a lot of like pressure when it comes to like the lights and the cameras, the backdrops, and you're on this pedestal of sorts, like you're on this table that's higher than the people. It just felt like you're on stage. So yeah, no, it was a crazy feeling. It was a great feeling. It was a fun experience. FanExpo, my gosh, there were so many people this year. I've never felt as hot and as sardined in my life, and I think that's an experience that you can only get in Toronto.
It's true. And, and it's back to the old days. It really is back to the before times. But it's such a safe place as well, too, because, again, you're surrounded by a bunch of nerds and geeks of all different factions. So it's a huge community of just people who just want to celebrate the things that they love. And if you weren't able to join us on Friday at our live show, don't worry. The video version of our conversation is out now on YouTube, and you can get the audio version on all podcast feeds. So make sure you listen to that. It was a really great conversation, and I think it's a really great two-parter with our BlackBerry interview, and then you follow that up with this Jay McCarroll chaser. It's a really great combination of interviews that you don't want to miss here on the Movie Podcast. So check those out. We'll have clips running on our socials as well too, but you got to hear the full conversation. But today is all about The Equalizer 3, which stars, of course, Denzel Washington, and making their, on-screen return together is Dakota Fanning, which they have not been in a movie together since. Is it Man on Fire?
Man on Fire, yeah.
Man on Fire all those years ago. So we're getting them back together after all of these years. Like I said, it is releasing in theaters on September 2nd. So be sure to check it out if you are an Equalizer head or an Equalizer. I guess like it's already Equalizer.
You're already an Equalizer, yeah.
You're an Equalizer? Go watch it.
Yeah.
But Anthony, start us off. Give us your first reactions to The Equalizer 3.
So just a little bit of history with The Equalizer. I don't have a history with The Equalizer.
Okay.
I know there was a 1 and a 2, and here we are with 3. But yeah, I remember the first one. Denzel Washington, like The Equalizer, he was working at like a hardware store or like a Home Depot, and I remember there was like this huge battle at the end. And then I remember the second one where he was with Pedro Pascal, and then I can't really pinpoint the arc of those stories, but I just know that this guy's a badass dude. He pretty much is the John Wick of his universe. And going into the third Equalizer, the pacing of it it felt very much like if you've ever played the game Hitman. It felt very much like if Hitman, the character, the bald guy with the barcode on the back,
Agent 47.
Agent 47, he retired in Italy. And I'm playing, and again, I'm not a big Hitman gamer and player, but I remember
Anthony's like, let me tell you about my history with Hitman. I don't have a history.
Don't even know what it is.
But Hitman, the one thing I remember from the Hitman is a lot of Mafia, a lot of like going to Sicily, going to Italy, and just this peaceful calmness to his character, matching with the peaceful calmness of, living on an island or being stuck in the mountainside with these beautiful homes. So it gave me that vibe. And because Denzel Washington is so good at whatever he does, he plays the Equalizer so well that I got this vibe of, whoa, this is what like Agent 47 would have been like if he just retired. And that's what it kind of gave me, like this vibe of Equalizer is, here's a dude who really doesn't want to do this anymore, but is placed in a situation where he likes where he is. And who doesn't like where he is? Like if you're on the mountainside,
south of Italy,
of Italy, and you're just in this small town, not a lot of people just living your life. Yeah, you want to kind of stay there and retire. The issue that I experienced with the Equalizer is why did he want to do this, how he got there in the first place. That part of the story is where I kind of got lost or disconnected. It wasn't a strong enough buy-in for me to feel like, you know what, it makes sense that he was there, and you'll learn why he's there at the end, but you're just wondering like, but that's such a weird part of the story to tell to get him into this situation, because it
Yeah, it's
becomes
not like it's not a big enough payoff, like you were saying,
it's
right? Where you're
not
like, oh,
the
okay,
the
sure,
the
okay.
buildup isn't there. And so when you kind of realize why he was there, you're just kind of like, I wish there was more to his character. And I feel like there is more to his character. I feel like there could be more. But Antoine Fuqua directed this story in such a way that I forgot it was even an Antoine Fuqua film. I thought it was directed by a European director, because it's just this slow paced melodic feel. You got like really beautiful establishing shots of the mountains of Italy and the city in itself, and just the culture that's there. And then you drive in this, I guess, this, I'm hesitant to say it, but like Denzel Washington's Equalizer is almost like a serial killer in a sense. I don't know if you got the
He's like
vibe.
a Terminator. He's like a Terminator.
He kind of is, like, where John Wick is very stoic, and he kind of, he does, he's going to kill a bunch of people, but he just one bullet next. Denzel Washington, yes, he's stoic, but he's also vocal. Like he'll come out of the city square and tell everyone, I'm not going to do this now, but eventually he will toy with you and hunt you down. And there's a little bit of like this weird Dexter slash vibe to him as well, where you're just wondering, holy crap, because the murders and the kills in this Equalizer are some of the gruesome that I've ever seen. And just remembering from the sequences from the first two movies, this one has some brutal kills and some interesting kills. And there are certain sequences I really liked about it.
Really quickly, Anthony, just to your point there, because you mentioned that it feels like Antoine Fuqua didn't direct this movie, in the sense like there's a different feel, a different theme entirely to the Equalizer 3. And it definitely does feel like a European director came in and brought that sensibility to it, because it has like this grittier feel where, yeah, like the first Equalizer had some pretty brutal moments with Denzel, I think, in the restaurant, and, with the corkscrew and the moments like that. But there was almost a tone in the first Equalizer where that felt more natural of what the events were going to, and it leading up to that, right? Where in Equalizer 3, because it's such a, like, it's such a beautiful environment that we're in, but it's also a little dark, and it's a little bit more like brooding, that like these moments feel a lot more like he's enjoying the murder more, and it makes you feel like, oh wow, he's murdering these people, where before it feels like, oh, he's taking these bad guys down, right? It's like, it's almost like it's striking a different tone between the two.
Exactly. Like I just feel like the first one, from what I remember, it was more of like a reaction and protection. Well, this one is more of like a hunting ground. Like he's hunting these bad guys down. So, but overall, like, it's just the story is what really I couldn't buy into it. I couldn't buy into the relationship between Denzel Washington and Dakota Fanning, and nothing against Dakota Fanning, but I just don't think her character was written in a way where she actually could give a really good performance. She was just written in such a dry, like sandpaper, like just there she is, she's an agent, and that's all it is. There's nothing emotionally connecting the two together. So when you have this buy-in of, oh, this is the first time they've acted since Man on Fire, you want to have like this emotional connection between the two, and they're just very disconnected.
You don't even realize, like, oh wow, it's been that long since they've acted together, and that was such a big pivotal role for them both, that when you come back to it now, it's like, oh yeah, I guess like it didn't really affect it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I'm at with it too, Anthony. Like, I think the cinematography was absolutely gorgeous in this film. We're getting a year where I feel like every other movie is set in Italy now. Like, Italy was really given those tax breaks out for movies to shoot there, because it's like every single big film, it's like, hey, let's go shoot in Italy. And I love it. I love seeing it, because it always just like photographs beautifully. in any movie that you're in. Like, you're like, wow, this looks so like just serene. But I really do love Denzel as, this character of the Equalizer. And I think, this is being marketed as, his final chapter. It didn't feel like that as much, as I'm like, I think there's so much room to tell more stories within the Equalizer world. And I really think what works the strongest in the Equalizer films is that sense of this guy, fighting for that community. And it's a little bit harder this time around because you're getting to know all of these characters that are, because he's the outsider, right? He's not the one from there, so he's really trying to connect with these people in this community in Italy. And it's nice when you see those moments of like, yeah, he's going to help them, he's going to stand up for them, and then you kind of balance that with just the murder of this so many people. And again, I know they're bad guys and the mob in the movie, and he's taking them down because they're threatening their livelihood. It's just an interesting battle of tones, I think, that Equalizer 3 struggles with, where Denzel is fantastic. He's great. He's very brooding, but he's also methodical, and I love seeing that performance within him. But that's also like a tone that it struggles with, where it also wants to be lighthearted community man who wants to help people. So it's an interesting balance. Shahbaz, I'd love for you to jump in and give us your thoughts on the tone balance, and also just your thoughts on the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the tone balance is definitely something that I feel was a bit of a struggle in this movie. I also, when this movie starts, and this is not a spoiler, when this movie starts, it really feels like that first opening 10 minutes of this film is like the ending of the movie. So I was like, oh, and I kept thinking like, oh, we're seeing the ending, because it felt like such a big moment in this movie, very violent, very final kill kind of a moment.
Yeah.
And then the scene that occurs in it, I'm like, oh, now I get why this is the final chapter of Equalizer 3. Then we find out that that's actually the beginning of the film, and it continues forward.
Cutting 24 hours earlier or anything
something like that.
Yeah.
But the movie picks up from there. That I felt like I kind of came in the middle of a movie, and I was like, oh, okay. And I found it even stranger than when we get to this town in Italy, all these people just want to get to know Roberto, and I don't get why. I didn't know what he was doing that was so interesting for them to want to be involved in his life. Like,
you could just call him Robert, man. Unless you're from the south, Roberto. Unless you're from the south of Italy, then
it was weird, because like all he would do was go to a cafe, drink coffee, and everyone was interested in his business. They were always like, "What did you used to do back home?" And it's like, why do you care? Like what has he done that is so interesting for you to be involved? It really was a forced way of having him in this community, and it never felt natural. All these characters that really wanted something to do just felt forced. The introduction of Dakota Fanning also kind of just felt forced. The main bad guy at the very end, like the big baddie, never also felt like the equal foe to the Equalizer. It never felt like, okay, this is the final chapter, this is what we're saving up for.
He's meeting his match.
He's meeting his match, exactly. It never happens. We also didn't ever really get one of those slowdown moments that we got in the first one and the second one of like, okay, I got 8 seconds, I'm going to click my clock, and then I'm going to plan this methodically out. No, it's like he hits the clock and then just starts killing right away, and it's super gruesome. And that's where it really feels like it's a whole new director, because it feels like, okay, we're tossing out some of the staples of the franchise and kind of throwing in something else. There's a slowness to the pace. Sometimes you kind of just get bored because there's killing that happens, and it slows down a lot and has Denzel just kind of sitting, watching, reading the newspaper, and then it goes back to killing a little bit again. And sometimes the kills just never felt earned. Like there's a moment where he kills a group of guys, and I'm like, I mean, yeah, sure, I get it, but like you didn't even give them a chance. Like you didn't even have a conversation with them and say, hey, step away from this moment. So it just felt a bit of like of an Equalizer 2.5 and not a full Equalizer 3 to me.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I think when you look at the first Equalizer, there's a bit of a reluctance to Roberts being called to action, right? We don't see him do anything of Equalizer-esque like superheroism in that first movie for a good chunk of the first act. You don't see it. You see him in the community. You're introducing him to Chloe Grace Moretz's character, building their relationship. So when she doesn't show up at the diner, you're getting that call to action for him. You're learning about him working at the Home Mart and the community, what he's doing, helping that guy, the security guard, make weight. So you're learning all about these different communal aspects, which has been something throughout all of the Equalizer films. And I like that we get to see Denzel almost struggle with his morality of having to go back to this world that he left behind. And it reminds me so much of that first John Wick, where that first John Wick, just like the first Equalizer, it's such like a call to action for both of them, where they have left this world behind. They are out, and now they're getting dragged back into it. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think they both came out in 2014. Right, we got Denzel and Keanu Reeves, Equalizer, and John Wick coming out in 2014. Shay, if you could check on that.
2014 was John Wick, yeah. So I think Equalizer was that year as well.
Yeah, so like it's funny that they were both, getting their first movies and then sequels in the same year this year.
2014.
In 2014, yeah. So there was such like a reluctancy to his going back into this world. So when you saw him committing those acts, it was almost like he was just like had that built up into him for such a long time in the first movie. And then the second movie, it's a little bit slower, but it's still all within that world and his connections from the past. Where this one, it feels like he's a little bit more unhinged. Robert's enjoying this mission more. He's enjoying having like this he kind of goes full Denzel in some moments where he's coming out and he's just like laughing with his hands up, and then he does his thing and takes people out. So that's where I was almost like struggling a little bit with like just the tonal balance between, is this a guy who doesn't want to do this anymore, or is this just who he is now and he enjoys taking people out for the greater good? And I think Denzel does it fantastically, and I think the action in this film is brutal, but it's also really fun to watch. But then you go back to that thought of like, okay, but does that really fit within the tone of this world? And like what Shahbaz said, because we're going into this movie where it just feels like we're thrown into it, it really did feel like a moment where like, okay, we're going to rewind the clocks back. We're going to see how we got it out of this impossible situation. And then we're going to come back to here, which I think would have been really, really cool. Almost like the beginning of like Mission Impossible 3 or something, right?
Because that opening is so cool. Like you see all these bodies led to waste. You're like, oh, I wonder how this happened, and we just never find out.
And that's almost like the mystery of him doing those acts is almost more interesting than seeing him do it sometimes, right? Because your mind fills in those gaps. Like, of course, like, man, if Denzel had to do this to all these people, they definitely deserved it. Right. And starting with that perspective is interesting. But as the rest of the story goes and you're seeing how the CIA is involved and Dakota Fanning's character is involved, it's almost like she's in it enough to, warrant, her character, but she's also too big of a recognizable face to be like, is there something more to your character or who you're working with? So you start trying to draw all these conclusions where it's mostly just a straightforward movie where it doesn't go to those extra, I guess, layers. It's just more of a straightforward story. So overall, like, I did enjoy my time watching the movie, but there's definitely issues within it. Anyone else want to jump in before we get to our final recommendations?
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of fun moments in the film, but the problem with the film is it doesn't leave a lingering effect on you. Whereas like the first one, when I watched it, I was like, oh, this is really cool, and there's some great moments. This one has those moments; they're a little too few and far between. And then you kind of just walk out of the film like, okay, yeah, that was fine.
Okay. Now I have a question for you guys before we get to our final recommendations. I want to know, since, I brought up John Wick, if John Wick and Robert from The Equalizer were locked in a room with one another, who's getting out alive? Who do you think is getting out alive?
I think John Wick is getting out alive. I think John Wick because John Wick has had to kill assassins, whereas a lot of what The Equalizer has done is just kill really defenseless people most of the time. like a lot of these dudes were like just hired guns, or some of them were like, this is our first day on the job. And then John Wick's like, this is the top assassin on the leaderboard. I'm gonna kill this guy.
I'm going for him. Yeah. Anthony, how about you?
I think John Wick would win that fight. As much as the Equalizer is a professional in what he does, I just don't think he can go against the Baba Yaga. Like, he just can't. Like, there is no way.
It's true. I'm there with you guys. It'd be fun to see, though. But it would be so fun to see like Denzel and Keanu team up in another movie.
Absolutely.
They were in a film earlier in their careers together in the 90s. It was I think Kenneth Branagh directed it.
Was it Glory?
It was Shakespeare.
No,
I don't. No, it wasn't Glory. That's with that's not the one with Matthew Broderick.
Yes.
Morgan Freeman. Yeah.
Yes.
I forget what Shakespeare played.
Much Ado About Nothing.
That's the one. Much Ado About Nothing. Denzel and Keanu are in that one together.
Yeah.
But yeah. go watch that one. That's a good one.
Yeah,
But yeah, let's get to our final recommendations. Anthony, I'm going to get you to start us off.
I'm going to say add it to your queue. Unless you are an Equalizer head or you love the fandom of Equalizer, then definitely go watch this in the theater. But if you're not, definitely wait for it to come to a streaming service. It's one of those movies where I was saying to Shay, it's a passerby film. It means like if you see it on TV, you'll watch it and then you'll never go back to it. And maybe 5 years from now, you'll see it again on TV and you'll watch it again. But it's not something that is going to be part of your library. I don't believe it would be part of your library. It's not there yet. I think one day, like John Wick, I think for us is part of our library of movies that we would go to continuously. Maybe one day another version of Equalizer could be that type of film for us.
I like that. I'm right there with you again, Anthony. I think this is one that you can, add it to your queue. If you are an Equalizer fan, again, this is the third film in this franchise, so you know what you're going in for. If you are on board for the first one and the second one, there's no doubt you're going to go watch this one in theaters, and I think there's a lot there if you've loved the series so far. But if you're just starting to get into this world, add it to your queue, check it out once it comes to streaming, and you'll find some enjoyment in it. Shahbaz, take us home.
Yeah, I think with the Equalizer, it relies on the charm of Denzel Washington. I think he's so fantastic whenever he's just kind of playing the character. And in this one, you don't get to see him kind of do it too much. He's more stoic for some reason. He's a lot more quiet, and then he just starts to kill. And for that reason, it didn't linger long enough. Whereas the first one I think is great. Second one, I don't think really hit it on the mark for me either. This one, better than the second one, but still not enough that it can really replace what the first one did. So for that reason as well, I will say add it to your queue. I think down the road, like Anthony's saying, you're watching TV or you're on TBS, you still have cable for some reason, it's on. You may just watch the whole thing.
Yeah, it's. I was about to ask you. I'm like, because my ranking would probably 1, 3, 2. So I feel like that's kind of across the board what all of our rankings would be. Anthony, are we on base there for you too?
Sure. Like again, I haven't watched the second one, but I would say 1, 3, 2 as well because 2 is not the one I see.
By default,
yeah.
1, 3, 2. It has to be. It has to be. Thank you so much for listening and watching the movie podcast review of The Equalizer 3. Of course, it is in theaters on September 1st, and I want to say thank you to our friends at Sony Pictures Canada for inviting us to watch the film and do some interviews, which will be out on the movie podcast feed very, very soon. Make sure you're following us on all social media platforms at The Movie Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and please join our Discord. We're having such great conversations in there. We have new people joining every single day, and we're building such a great community of movie lovers, of music lovers, of video game lovers, of just lovers of entertainment. You don't want to miss it. We're having a great time. Our show notes have all of the links that you need to know with everything going on here on the movie podcast. And of course, there's so much more to look forward to. We have TIFF coming up, so much on our plates, but we have lots of fun news to share very, very soon. That was this time with the movie podcast, and we'll see you next.